Hey, this is Future Kevin recording several months after G-Fest. I was putting the video together on YouTube for the panel presentation from last year and remembered that there were about 20 some slides that we never actually got to during the live presentation. So I figured just as a bonus, because I know as an obsessive completionist that it bothers me when I can't see everything, and I'm sure a lot of people that follow my stuff are probably in the same boat. I would go ahead and put these additional slides up just with a little quick bit of narration as a special extra. So if you haven't watched the previous video, go and do that. That's where the real meat of this subject is. But this is just a few additional slides that we never got to due to the time constraints. So, continuing on about this topic of movies about kaiju filmmaking, uh, one of the big ones that I never got to, and I think that's really kind of a shame, is Outer Man. This is Minoru Kawasaki's kind of Ultraman spoof, and honestly, I think it's one of Kawasaki's best movies. He did this for the 50th anniversary of Ultraman, and basically, this is set in a world where much like the real world, there's a long running series of superhero shows that have been airing in Japan for the past 50 years. But the twist is that it's based on real life. However, the characters, the silver and red giants that the show is portraying as the heroes, are actually invaders. And this is all a psyop to brainwash humanity and make them accept these invaders when they get there. And the real heroes are the Sylvie, like based off of Sylvie Vartan and Baltan Seijin from Ultraman, who are kind of the underdogs in this story. But humanity by and large is pretty brainwashed to accept Outer Man as this hero. So who can stand against them? Well, the answer is tokusatsu actors who are in the TV show, because they're so jaded and disillusioned about the entire process that they are immune to the propaganda. So I would recommend checking out Outer Man from SRS. Another movie that, especially early on in the film, deals a bit with the filmmaking process is The Monsters. This is a terrible title if you want to Google it. I'd say look for The Monsters 2023. The Japanese title translates to something more like The Loitering Monster or something like that. This is not a fun movie. This is a really depressing film about child abuse, but the main character is kind of a well-meaning, goofy dude who goes out and films self-made, low-budget monster movies on the weekends. And early on in the film, you see a few sequences where he's making these movies just himself and a small camera, and he brings his dog with him, and he'll put on the monster suit and then he'll play the victim and he'll try to edit it together so that he looks like he's being attacked, and all of that is kind of charming, and it just makes a emotional gut punch as the movie progresses. Much more sobering to think about what a likable dude this is, who gets wrapped up in a really terrible set of circumstances. There's a TV drama called The Man Who Summoned a Monster. This is part of an NHK series for first-time directors, basically. Um, and this is about a guy making a local tourism video. So you remember we mentioned Kaiju Yaro in the previous segment. Similarly, you have movies like Bugon that are meant to drive up tourism for a specific area. And speaking of Bugon, that was directed by Kiyotaka Taguchi. Kiyotaka Taguchi did the special effects sequences in this film. So the special effects are all kind of clustered together at the very end, but otherwise it's just a drama about a guy who's making a monster movie to drive up local tourism. And Taguchi's worked on several of those. Speaking of Taguchi, he got his start as a small child getting interested into special effects by taking still photography of his Zoids model kits. He'd like kit bash them and try to set them up in elaborate dioramas and take photos of them. And then several years later, he got to direct an episode of Ultraman Omega that dealt with the topic of a little kid who is taking, still photography of kaiju, and that's really his passion, is that um, bit of special effects. And this is really, I think Taguchi's really a mentor for a lot of young people, so it makes sense that he'd be the guy to direct this episode. So you can see in the episode here, the little kid is taking a photo of this model in front of a plate of fried chicken, but in the background it looks like a mushroom cloud behind him, right? So it's kind of fun on that front. This was written by Otsuichi, who has done several horror films like Goth and Zoo. I guess he's a horror novelist, and a lot of his stuff gets adapted. Um, but yeah, really neat episode. Had not actually aired when I had done this panel at G-Fest before, but I decided to throw it in while I'm recording after the fact. Speaking of things that I didn't have in the initial draft of the panel, Kappa Mikey. This was something that after I did the panel, several people came up to me and said, "Hey, what about Kappa Mikey?" And honestly, this was pretty much off my radar. I'd heard of it. It was a Nicktoons TV series. It ran for 52 episodes, but was not something I'd ever actually watched. But yeah, sure enough, this is uh, a series about a American guy who goes and acts in a Japanese film studio, and it's got lots of goofy anime uh, gags and sight gags and lampoons and parodies and so on and so forth. It's very crude animation, but they do some clever little touches here and there. You can see the main character is American and has that thick outline because he's an American character, uh, because that's the art style. Whereas the other characters that are with him in Japan are much more like anime styled, etc. Moving on to some other media, we'll talk about Chroma Squad, which is a Brazilian game. Brazil has a long history of tokusatsu imports. They were trying to make their own Just Beyond movie a little while ago, for an example. That's because they have one of the largest Japanese populations of any country. And so there's a long history of watching Super Sentai on television. And that makes it really unfortunate that when Chroma Squad was released widely, the Saban company, who's responsible for Power Rangers, just decided that, well, this is clearly their intellectual property, even though it's not actually based on Power Rangers. It's based on Super Sentai, and Power Rangers is also based on Super Sentai. If anything, it's a similar family tree, but no, they insisted that it has to include the phrase "inspired by Saban's Power Rangers" for the international releases of this game. The game is about running a Sentai studio, basically. So it's kind of a strategy tactics style game involving that. Heard lots of good things about this one. For the duration, we're going to talk about some manga and comic books, starting in really at the beginning of the story chronologically. With the creation of the original Godzilla, there's a manga in 1995. It was 2 chapters, it ran in Shonen Sunday, called The Creation of Godzilla. Features main characters who are all of the bigwigs that Eiji Tsuburaya, Shiro Honda, Haru Nakajima, Tomoyuki Tanaka, Sadamasa Arikawa, etc., etc. Hasn't been reprinted anywhere, so it's kind of tough to track down in those individual 2 issues of Shonen Sunday at this point, because it's been 30 years, but cool piece of apocrypha. A little bit easier to find is the book that was supervised by the Heisei Godzilla special effects dude, Koichi Kawakita. This is the complete Godzilla movies, and this has a short at the back of it, a manga by Shinji Nishikawa, that talks about the whole genesis of Godzilla, including pitches about the giant octopus and then the Project G, etc., etc. All of this is narrated by Nishikawa's signature little cute chibi Godzilla, who kind of exposits towards the audience. Also, going back to the original Godzilla, there's the Ishiro Honda story from 2001. This also was a two-issue thing for Shonen Magazine. Uh, it's really a bio for Honda. It talks about his, kind of post-war recovery period, getting back into the film industry, and gets into the making of Godzilla. Now, you'll notice here that Honda doesn't really look like himself, and neither do his compatriots. Akira Kurosawa, his good friend, Eiji Tsuburaya. The While he's an old man, he didn't quite look like that, and that's something that happens with a lot of these stories. Even though that they are adapting the stories of people's lives, they don't quite use their actual likenesses. Tsuburaya is a figure who's actually been in a whole lot of different manga. There's several biographical um, manga series, like, so they'll have a book devoted to a single person. So, for an example, you might have a book about uh, Osamu Tezuka, or you could have a book about Barack Obama. It could be people who are in politics, people in sports, um, people going back hundreds of years, people more recent, just people of cultural note that have uh, a unique story to tell. Uh, these biography series have been done for many, many people, and it's a good way to introduce children to who these people are. So, several of these kinds of series have been done over the years, but here are three of them that all tell the life story for Eiji Tsuburaya. Similarly, telling the story of Eiji Tsuburaya is a children's picture book that is mandatory reading in Sukagawa, which is where Eiji Tsuburaya is from. They have a Tsuburaya Museum in that town, which is basically the community center for the city. And yeah, every elementary school student in Sukagawa owns a copy of the Legends of Eiji Tsuburaya picture book. It's also available free for any resident of the town to download. Another biographical piece on Tsuburaya is a novella by Jim Shepard called Master of Miniatures. It really kind of deals more with his relationship with his wife Masano. Uh, I've heard that this takes a lot of liberties, so you know, grain of salt while you're reading that one. I haven't actually read it myself, however. Uh, Not part of one of those biographical things, but still a biographical manga is a single volume manga called Movie Dream, and this is a bio for Ray Harryhausen, the famous stop motion animator. Um, Deals with his relationship with Ray Bradbury and Willis O'Brien, and again, nobody really looks similar to themselves in this. You can look at the young and the old Ray Harryhausen in this, and neither of them look like the Ray Harryhausen that we know from any photos of him at work. Who does look like himself is Junho Bong, the Korean filmmaker. Uh, Made all kinds of accolades around the world, but famously he made two monster movies, The Host and Okja, and this manga does in fact cover the making of those. So you can see some behind the scenes with the design of the host monster, etc., in these screen caps here. A really cool series for those who are into lost media is Reijiro Kado's kind of investigative series, and he's done this twice. The first time was for Tokusatsu Ace in 2004. He did a kind of mini series looking into Terra Incognita, which is a monster that was on television, which all of the footage has been lost basically. And then later for Tokusatsu Hiho from 2015 to 2018, he did a whole bunch of series talking about all kinds of different topics. Like he talked about the kind of the proto version of Jet Jaguar called Red Alone that made an appearance on television. There's a proto Mechagodzilla thing that showed up on Chibico Special. There are all kinds of unmade kaiju that were designed and never realized for different hero shows. And basically, these comics have kind of like a detective story format where the main character is this investigator who goes around interviewing different witnesses and kind of compiling and making images based on what they say that they saw. It's really neat stuff and gives an insight into some of these uh, pieces of real interesting pop culture sometimes that had big effects down the road that I guess have just been lost to time because they weren't properly recorded. Continuing on the making of Godzilla, getting into the later stuff, the Crazy Godzilla era. This is a two-volume series by Shinji Nishikawa that talks about the Heisei and Millennium films. Shinji Nishikawa, of course, being the designer for a lot of those, so he was there in person. Um, so these are available as a combined edition and also as separate volumes. I understand the separate volumes have some material that's not in the combined edition, so keep that in mind when you're looking for this one. Um, I wanted to call out Shinichi Wakasa here because he was a guest at G Fest when this panel was going on. Um, and speaking of Nishikawa and creation stories, he also has a short in one of these volumes that talks about his time meeting Screaming Mad George. So, Screaming Mad George is a Japanese effects technician who worked in Hollywood a whole lot, and his work there also include the Guyver, which we talked about earlier in this panel. So, uh, got some interesting stuff going on behind the scenes there as well. A very fictionalized account of the making of something is Akiko Fuji's story, which is kind of about the making of Ultraman. And this is written by Hiroko Sakurai. So if you go see Hiroko Sakurai and bring her a copy of this, she'll be delighted. I had her sign my copy of it earlier. Again, it takes a lot of liberties. It's not meant to be an actual biographical thing. It's much more kind of like goofy comedy, um, physics breaking nonsense. Speaking of nonsense, there's of course the great manga author and suit actor Hurricane Ryu, who was among other things in the King Ghidorah suit in 1991. He's done a number of manga and has one called Kaiju Baka Ichidai, which means like the kaiju idiot generation. It's also the name of Hurricane Ryu's biography, but he did this for the Godzilla comic anthology, which was a two-volume series from the early 90s, and this was done in collaboration with Minoru Kawasaki again. So this tells the story of this like up and coming suit actor who's really macho and has a lot to prove, going up against this really gnarly old dude who's a longtime veteran, and they're butting heads. This is a story that we've seen numerous times in live action things, as we talked about in the previous segment. But it is interesting here that Hurricane himself would have been up against Ken Satsuma in the Godzilla suit. However, in this, it really portrays it as though it's Haruo Nakajima himself, and you can see that this character who's named Mr. Uejima looks a lot like Haruo Nakajima. He doesn't really look like Ken Satsuma. A short two-part manga. This is two chapters. I really feel like this could have been a whole series. Is by the great Naoki Urasawa, the person that gave us 20th Century Boys and Pluto. Uh, and he's done a number of kaiju titles, I think most prominently as Asadora. But one of his early works kind of dealt into his kind of fandom for this stuff and this is Mighty Boy. So this is a story about a stunt dude who's really um, kind of in trouble with his relationship because his girlfriend thinks that it's embarrassing that he works on this children's program. She doesn't take him seriously. She like cheats around on him or whatever. and then at the end she kind of like sees how actually impressive and hard all of this work is, and she kind of like comes around. But I feel like this really could have been a bigger story if Urasawa had committed to it, but he had a lot of other things going on at the time, and can't complain too much about the excellent career that he's had subsequently. It's a two-volume manga called Kaiju House. This is a comedy. Basically, this dude uh, owns a house. He's gonna have it be destroyed, and the director and the main actor move in as studying for how the movie's going to be made, and it's shenanigans with these two extra unwanted roommates, basically. Nuigurumen. This is a three-volume series. Uh, this is basically another comedy. It's about some like kind of like independent, kind of low budget TV superhero actors who are you know living in poor circumstances and struggling to make their kind of crappy TV show together. Kimitoku. There's actually multiple series that are called Kimitoku, so if you're looking for scans, keep that in mind. Um, Basically, this is an abbreviation for a Japanese title that translates to "Even You Can Make a Tokusatsu Film." It's kind of in that cute girls doing cute things subgenre where you have like a group of high school girls who are all together working in their amateur tokusatsu club, and the main character is kind of grabbed and forced into this club because of her proportions makes her good to wear kaiju suits. But then she can be kind of the point of view character, learning all of the tricks and trade from the main characters who are much more hardcore otaku about everything. This is a Tsuburaya collaboration, so they have lots of licensed Ultraman kaiju showing up and lots of fun references. It's a fun series. It's only been slightly fan translated. There's like a couple chapters maybe, but the whole thing has not been translated so far. Moving off of Japanese comics onto some Western comics, there's Madame Che and the Monsters. This is a German graphic novel, but it is available in English as well. And this is about the wife of Shin Sang-ok. Now, if you'll remember, uh, she and her husband were both kidnapped by Kim Jong Il, brought to North Korea, and made to make movies against their will. This is mostly well known for the film Pulgasari, which is a monster movie that had some Toho involvement. Um, and this comic really kind of tells the Pulgasari story, and talks a lot about the making of Pulgasari as an allegory for Chur's whole struggle and trying to gain her freedom and fight the system and yada yada yada. And it's pretty. She wasn't actually in real life involved with the making of Pulgasari, so that makes the whole conceit of this a little bit exaggerated. But this is the most notable film that Shin made when he was in North Korea, so it makes sense that for the sake of exploitation, and also just purely visually, it's great that they went with this as the kind of the crux of it. Ken Sasama does show up as a character on one page because he was in the Pulgasari costume. Of course, in real life, he didn't really interact with many of the people on the Korean side when making this. So, again, little bit of more trivia than actual adherence to the realism of the actual events. One that is, by and large, very faithful, as far as I can tell, is Rhymes with Takei. This is a autobiography for George Takei, the actor best known for playing Mr. Sulu in Star Trek, but he's done a lot of voice acting work and other things. And his professional career really began with getting a dubbing gig for Rodan in the 1950s with the King brothers. So you get to see the young George Takei uh, going and getting this job, and then him recording for Rodan in this comic. So that's really neat. And aside from that, it's just a sweet story about his overcoming adversity and his life drama, etc., etc. So worth reading for reasons other than Rodan as well. There are a few more examples that we could throw out. I know people would uh, also point out if I hadn't brought up Gojiro, which was a novel from the early '90s. If you were a Godzilla fan in the early '90s, this was one that was all over the place on bookstore shelves, which is kind of like a pessimistic novel about a monster who works in the film industry. Um, then there's a few other like gag manga that we have examples of here. Godzilla World, Dinosaur Girl, Tarano-chan, Kong Oyaji. But really, I think that we're getting down to the end. But I'm sure more examples will come up over the continued existence of film and media. So if you've been watching this far, thanks for watching, and I hope to see everybody at the next panel, be it at G Fest or somewhere else. Thanks.